We're good. Okay, so we're here at Devoxx, and I'm here with Igor and Misko from AngularJS. And AngularJS, for those who've never heard of it, is a new, can we call it a JavaScript framework? Does it,
sure.
Are you offended?
That's the closest.
That's the closest, but you have a different take on things. You like the things that are declarative, right?
Yes. I like to think of it as what a browser would have been had it been designed for web applications.
And you don't like to deal with the DOM, or you think other frameworks maybe are abstracting away and hacking the web and the browsers, and you're trying to be more true to maybe HTML
yes.
and
yes, a lot of frameworks take the approach that DOM and HTML and CSS is complicated stuff, even sometimes the JavaScript, and so they try to hide it from the user. And so we're kind of unique in that we're saying, no, we're just going to embrace it, and we're just going to see if we can monkey patch some of the deficiencies to make it better.
So do you want to talk about data binding and templating and how that helps?
So in Angular applications, we see that the biggest benefit you get from using Angular is this declarative templating. In Angular, you don't do imperative DOM manipulation just anywhere in your application that you're common in jQuery applications. In Angular application, you have a model. This model is something domain specific to your application, and this model drives the view. And it drives it in a way that you take this template and you declaratively specify where this model binds to the template. And you let the templating engine figure out how to take the model and push it through this template and render the view and keep the model and the view in sync at all times.
Right, so this is bidirectional. It's
yeah,
not.
So it's bidirectional. If you have input fields, we actually take the user input and we push it to the model back. If you have just single binding, we take whatever changes happen to the model and update the view for you automatically.
So something else I understand about AngularJS is the dependency injection being built in, which is a term, obviously it means a lot to, say, Java developers. Can you elaborate on that? And what does it even make sense for Java and for the web? And is it about testability?
So testability is one reason why we embrace dependency injection, but in general we find that dependency injection just gives you these guidelines. So how should you structure your application into smaller components, and then have dependencies between components that are automatically resolved when any of the components needs to be instantiated. So not only dependency injection helps you with testability, it helps you just making the application easier to understand and write and maintain.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned components. What was the component story in AngularJS? Do you build components, custom components?
Yeah, so we can we're trying to follow the web component story. So we want to turn...
You want to say what web components are?
Web components is the new standard that's coming from the W3C, where they're recognizing the need, if you're building an application, that the divs and spans is not what you want, rather you want reusable stuff like tabs and control panels and so on.
You basically want higher level abstraction. So you want to build abstractions from this small li span or whatever you have, and just create a component that would just say, oh, this is a tab, or this is a Google map, or any other component that you might have that is then internally structured from these low-level DOM elements.
Right, and Angular, how does that translate? And
so with Angular, we allow you to build these reusable components today. We use existing DOM APIs in JavaScript, which is not as powerful as what you could do with changes to the native APIs. And our story is, let's start building these reusable components today and pretend that we already have this low-level native APIs for building components. And when the web component specification is done, it's going to align really well because it will allow you to build the same kind of components, but with native APIs.
Okay.
So what I want to add to it is, what we're trying to do is we want to turn HTML into a declarative DSL, like domain-specific language, right? Where if you're building a application that has a lot of panes and panels and text, a calendar thing, then you want to have a vocabulary that's useful for building that application.
Okay. So I have my components, I have my views, how do I wire up a backend? How do you get the data from your friends, producing and managing the data stores?
So we're trying to be server-side agnostic, so there's no server-side component. That means that as long as the server is producing JSON and something that looks
or
reasonably,
XML or
XML,
it doesn't matter. Like if there is a way how you can get data from the server to the client, then we can just use this. If this is done through HTTP, if it's done through WebSockets, if the encoding is JSON or XML, we don't care. We provide you some helpers, so like for HTTP and RESTful backends, we give you some support to how you can communicate. But we really think that there are such a variety of backends out there that it doesn't really make sense for us to be tied to only one specific backend. And you should be able to use anything. One thing that is really interesting for me is that there are new approaches of solving the backend. For example, Meteor.js completely says, REST doesn't work for applications that we're building today on the web. We need to rethink how we deliver data to the browser. And integration between AngularJS and Meteor is something that we are heavily discussing right now.
Okay. So for a developer looking into trying out AngularJS, what does the tool chain look like? What are the tools you recommend? Do you recommend any? I mean, this is the web, this is editing.
Tool number one, browser.
This is declarative
You need
stuff.
a browser.
You need a browser, right.
Yeah.
Do you need the full-blown IDEs that...
No,
not really. Because most of the editors today have support for HTML. So they can do syntax highlighting, they can do auto completion for HTML. And Angular is really just HTML extended. And JavaScript, of course. So if you have an editor that is suitable for web design and just simple web development, then it's suitable for AngularJS development. There are some IDEs that are better. For example, WebStorm currently has the best support for AngularJS, but there are other IDEs that are working.
Support, just to be clear.
So this means auto-completion of Angular-specific attributes. It also means maybe just pre-generating templates for you. So if you have some component that has a well-known structure, it can just pre-generate the code for you. What else am I missing? Testing, running tests with Angular. So Angular is really we like to tell people that they really should test drive their applications, and IDE can help there. So having a good integration with test runners is important.
Right. You have integration with Chrome DevTools as well for debugging purposes.
For debugging purposes, Chrome is amazing because it helps us see what the application looks like at runtime, and the debugging tools in Chrome are already pretty good. Like you can debug JavaScript, you can debug the element, and you can look at the DOM and see what state it is in. But we thought that we could do better, so we actually created an extension for the web inspector that you see in Chrome. And with this extension, you can visualize what the application structure looks like, what is the current model state, what is the state of the dependency injector, and all the dependencies in my system.
Okay, very nice. So I obviously have written some JavaScript already. I have pages. I'm using probably some frameworks. Does Angular play well with those frameworks, or do I need to rip everything off?
That's something that I feel very strongly about. I think one of the success of jQuery was that you didn't have to subscribe to the whole thing. You could just say, I'm going to start using jQuery on this little tiny portion of the page, and then I grow as I like it. And so we structured the Angular in the same exact way, where you can just sprinkle as little of it or as much of it you want. You can even use it with a round-trip application, and then later on think about how you turn the round-trip application into a single-page Ajax application.
Okay, and the dependencies, how big are they? I mean, are you dragging along like big libraries, or
Angular is about the size of jQuery, a little smaller.
No,
because you're right about jQuery, you can do that, but
it's much smaller.
It's much smaller.
Yeah, it's much smaller than
so it's 29K.
So Angular itself is 29K right now. When it's GCP unified, we have some plans to make it even smaller, but really 29K is not that big. It's a small image.
I think so.
Yeah. So. I think we're doing quite well there. Like we try to keep the core of the framework small, and then if there are some functionality that we see that people use but not all the time, then that should be in a separate module that you can load if you want to. So, and often this brings up the question of what about components, like other components that the framework brings and contains, and the answer is no. We wanted to build the core of framework very small, and we wanted to make it possible to build all these components on top of Angular. So one of the design philosophies on Angular is everything should be extensible. So when you look at all these custom attributes that Angular created, like ngRepeat, ngShow, all of this stuff is built on the APIs that are available to all the developers. So if you actually don't like all of our custom directives, you can just throw them away and build your own.
Okay.
And just use the HTML templating core and the dependency injector.
So where should people go to find out more about AngularJS and get started?
AngularJS.org.
.org. That's probably a good place.
There's also this search engine called Google.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Does it work? Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks guys for being here and then
Thank you
taking
for
the time.
having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.